So it's a global work team meeting, an informal meeting today, talking about a couple of topics like security reference documentation, and then software bill of materials and digital bill of materials. To get started, some more people might turn up in a minute, but just to get started, Mark, I wanted to let you know that we had a good response to the security reference guide, and I think it might be time to heavily promote it on the website. So I wanted to get your ideas of how you'd like to see it promoted. A dedicated page, should we do some case studies, and so on.
Oh yeah, sure. That's great to hear though.
Mark, if we do some case studies, might you be able to collaborate with me on a what-if case study, just an imaginary example showing how it can be implemented in the market?
Definitely, yeah, we can do that.
All right, that's great. I had some particular interest expressed by the Chinese government, actually. The department CAICT, part of the Ministry of Trade, and they're looking into what type of standards can assist with security. It's very similar to the NTIA effort in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
They're one of our main markets.
Understood.
All right. Kyung-Ye, I wanted to check in for the Korean market. If we have, let's say, a case study, and if we try to explain in more detail how it connects with things like the executive order in the US, is that enough, do you think, for Korean companies, or do we need to do something more?
You mean that explain Korean market?
Mm-hmm. About this, essentially, how to use OpenChain in security.
Security, yes. Actually, I delivered the OpenChain spec about security to our security team in AGE, and they are very interested in OpenChain spec also. So many Korean companies are interested in OpenChain security spec because they are more interested in security better than compliance, actually.
Yes, that's something we saw in quite a lot of other places too.
Yeah.
Do you think we need to translate the information into Korean to help?
Yes.
Okay.
Of course.
Checking in. Thank you very much, Kyung-Ye. Ninjoji-san, so we're basically talking about how we really showcase the security reference guide. It's been out for about a month now. Mm-hmm. We've had some good general feedback, but it's probably time to strongly promote it on the website with a dedicated page and case studies and so on. Do you think we should have it in Japanese for the Japanese market? Should we have the page multi-language?
Hi. Hear me?
Konnichiwa. Wakara. Hi.
Hi, this is Tak. And thank you for the introduction of this discussion. Certainly, so as mentioned, Kim-san, it's I feel all the same because the Japanese markets where almost every company interested in this security assurance reference guide. But I'm sorry, I'm not so sure how much extent those companies investigating these documents. I'm sorry.
Of course, understood. That's no issue at all. I think that we will probably just Well, we'll follow the same path as Korea. We will build this page with case studies out. I'll work with Mark on that, and we'll translate it into Korean and Japanese and Mandarin to support the local markets and see what happens. We do know that we have interest from the US and China explicitly on the security reference guide. Okay, I just wanted to check, we have a few new people on the call. If anyone has had any feedback from their company or their clients regarding the use of OpenChain in security that we should be aware of. Okay, if there's no additional feedback on that. Mark, we had no negative feedback, which is great. So it looks like it's simply a matter of pushing this hard now across the board.
Yeah, one thing that comes to mind is having an FAQ, and we talked briefly about this in the past. It's just one of many things we could do, right? First question would be, are there any questions in particular people can think of that if we did have an FAQ, they would like to potentially have included on, in that list? And then I guess the second question would be, in addition to an FAQ, what other kinds of materials might be useful? In addition to the case studies, of course.
All right, I'll prepare a shared document for us to get cracking on the FAQ. And as we start to push the security assurance guide harder, I'll make sure these are the two main questions put to the community. So Mark, we have a mini summit on the 30th. Should we essentially target initial feedback from the expanded outreach by then so people can do live editing or whatever?
Sure, sure, that makes sense. That's a good target date.
Okay, in that case, promotion will be hard, starting probably in the next, let's say, 2 weeks before. So the 16th, I'll try to have the first iteration. Mark, I'll, of course, make sure everything's in your hands as well for approval. And we'll build out from the 16th onwards for 2 weeks. And on the 30th, we have a mini summit where we can truly bring together the feedback and any updates needed or plans for future distribution.
I was curious, is anybody on this call going to be in Seattle at the conference? I understand COVID is probably going to restrict a lot of people. And I will be there. Actually, it's actually my hometown. So, but would anybody else on this call be there?
I won't because I'm not traveling yet, but I do plan to be at the November mini summit.
Yeah, I suspect many people would not be going. So,
yeah, I was talking with Kyung-Ye the other day, and I think Kyung-Ye, you're a bit the same as me. You're looking at events later, but not Seattle at the moment.
Yes.
Being stuck on a plane for 12 hours with 350 people is still
not very attractive, no.
Alrighty, second topic. So as everyone must be aware at this stage, SPDX is published as ISO 5962. Huge congratulations to everyone, not least Mark, who's been part of SPDX for ages, helping with it. The fact that SPDX is out now as an SBOM available from the ISO website, fully published, is great. It should appear on the publicly available specification page, in other words, the free download page at some point. This is what happened with OpenChain, I think a week or two later. I think on the SPDX list, some people have been raising a concern about, will they have to pay 198 Swiss francs? And the answer is no. You can download SPDX 2.2 on the SPDX website, it's free. SPDX 2.2.1 is just the ISO formatted one. It's the same spec. And like I said, they might be ponderous, but ISO will also put this on the publicly available specification page, the free specification page, same as OpenChain, given that they're the exact same type of standard. What is important, though, is that now that we've got a global SBOM, modern, comprehensive, modular, the dialogue is turning to digital bill of materials as well. And this is probably where we're going to spend a lot of time in the next year and a half. I'm raising this because in NTIA and so on, there's been a lot of discussion with people like Alan Friedman, who's Director of Cybersecurity at US Department of Commerce. And they've been talking a lot about SBOMs. But the industry, of course, will be talking about DBOMs more and more. In some ways, a digital bill of materials is well known. In this article, which I put in the chat, banks use them as a way to have a single bill of materials for the software, hardware, and firmware. So the difference between a software bill of materials and a digital bill of materials is scope. A digital bill of materials is the whole deliverable, describing everything that's coming in there. And it's really what you need for excellent security. I mean, you want to know precisely what software, hardware, and firmware, and anything else is coming to you or is running your infrastructure. So you could regard it as we're on the Google Earth of conformance and we're zooming out from SBOM. We're zooming out to an even bigger picture with hardware and other related items. Digital bill of materials discussion right now has more or less been centered on the traditional use cases of DBOM. But now that the industry as a whole is, well, after normalizing SBOMs across all IT, now that we have a global ISO SBOM standard with significant traction, it's going to be inevitable that we turn on DBOMs. So I wanted to pause here and just ask, does everyone have some experience of a DBOM, or was my explanation enough? Would you like me to explain them a little bit more or proceed? Just pausing here.
So I guess when it comes to the DBOM, we're talking more about IoT devices. For example, if I was to download an app from an app store onto my phone, the app itself, I would imagine, would have an SBOM, but wouldn't have a DBOM, I'm guessing. But if you were to pass over your phone to someone, you'd say, what's the DBOM for the entire phone? Would that include, I guess, obviously the hardware, the OS of their phone, plus all the apps that are on the phone, so it would be much bigger?
Oh yeah, that would be it exactly. And it would go all the way down to, on the cellular modem, what's the firmware on the 5G cellular modem inside this phone? Now, naturally, most organizations would never want this information, but if you're a government department for security purposes, you might want the whole deal. And for this reason, DBOMs are probably something that will be deployed in very broad strokes by most people, but incredibly granular by certain types of client. And I suppose the question mark will be, will we end up with a DBOM, which is like SPDX, modular, and it can be really light, like SPDX Lite, or it can literally tell me where every chip came from in this phone. What's the origin, what factory, what date. And we're probably going to have to look at that conversation, which is enormous, but important. I wouldn't say, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's fine. It makes sense. Yeah.
And while immediately IoT or similar items fit into that, we probably need to include other technologies as well. For example, when it comes to a car, delivering a single computer system on a car or multiple systems will increasingly require sophisticated DBOMs. I'll give you an example elsewhere. Bosch is a world leader in high-performance electric bike drivetrains, but that includes everything. from the basic control software through to the sophisticated hardware. And for them, that DBOM would have a pretty big range of materials included. But by the same token, you know, if you download something off an app store, the DBOM, if any, would probably be a subset. In other words, it would be an SBOM, and that would probably just be SPDX. It probably brings us to how they should interact. I mean, where we should land with DBOMs isn't that someone somewhere reinvents the software side, because we've got that now. What we need to do is make sure the hardware side, firmware side, provenance of material side slots in neatly. I've heard rumblings, you know, in places, including LF, that companies are very close to driving DBOM initiatives. If this is moving forward, I wanted to check who on the call would be interested in participating in the early discussions.
I would definitely be interested. We're a company that we're constantly, you know, delivering software to help largely embedded in IoT devices.
Yeah.
It would be a natural extension for us to see, you know, that expansion or that extension of more data. I think our customers would be particularly interested in that. So yeah, sure, I'd be interested.
Yeah, I think we'd be interested as well, Shane.
Absolutely brilliant. I'll make sure that as soon as I get conversations rolling, you're both included. And one thing that's going to come up, and this is where I think we can actually help in OpenChain and SPDX communities, is that when they're discussing things like in this article, they talk about software, hardware, and firmware. Firmware is only software. So one thing we can help people with is setting their context. Now, there is some geeky stuff here. In the article, they mention how to make DBOMs, right? So here's an example of a DBOM node. So this is essentially software to help interact with DBOM information. And you'll notice a certain name here, Unisys. So Unisys seems to be pushing DBOMs hard. Oops, I double-clicked. So we need to track what Unisys are doing on DBOMs to get a good idea of where the market's likely to land. This being on GitHub is of interest to those who plan to do more deep dives around the current state of DBOMs. I just want to highlight on the call that you do not need to do this, look into this if you're not planning to go deep into this stuff. We will be doing the overview of DBOMs in a more user-friendly manner. Oh, Kyung-Ye just found a much nicer overview of DBOMs to look at, and I'll just post it here. It's in the chat as well. And here you go. This is an early consortium project from LF, which is at a very early stage of discussing what those could be. At this stage, I would just flag that the information here is what appears to be the first take from some parties who are looking at this, as opposed to parties who are describing their current active deployment. So the item I sent to you with the story is essentially taking DBOMs as a given because these people are in the middle of using them all the time. And this is an attempt to break it down and describe it from first principles. Thanks, Kyung-Ye, and I see Carson also shared.
I'm also in for the discussion. You can count me in. Could you click key concepts here? So because I think this is very interesting. I mean, actually, this is the first time I'm exposed to the concept of DBOM. Thank you for that.
You are most welcome.
Okay. But I personally think it's kind of a very large concept, to be honest, yeah, with communicating nodes and distributed ledgers to organize data. I would have wished for a more, yeah, let's say, a modular design here. Yeah? We are working with SBOMs. We are connecting currently SBOMs to vulnerability data and the like. And there is the discussions we have with customers relating to, first of all, the security level of this information and how this can be exchanged and how this can be managed and assessed. I mean, this is for me at the moment at the core of the discussion, rather than, well, okay, I see the point of pushing it into the supply chain and establishing here kind of a collaborative environment. However, I think this is, I personally think we are 10 years away from that still. Yeah, and it's not bad to start with it, but I think one should go ahead and take the individual items there and also map it to existing standards like SPDX and the like.
Yes, agree. In fact, one reason that I didn't pull up this site is because it's thinking through debombs, but it quickly jumps into architecting implementation in software, right? And architecting implementation in processes. And probably the conversation needs to start with people who are already doing it. What's happening in the market, rather than immediately jumping to how do we architect some kind of holistic solution that can include blockchains and database information transfer between clients. Yeah.
Another thing that pops to my mind is I see in the recent years a little bit a lack of. I see that we apply technology everywhere, yeah, and we have good things, we have good discussions, we have formats and the like, but we do not discuss on the characteristics and quality of data, yeah. In particular, in this realm of vulnerabilities and connecting assets to their vulnerable product, and to find the current vulnerabilities. I think there is for me there is a gap that nobody is closing. And I wonder whether such a discussion should also be added in this area, where we say we do not only look at the mechanisms how we transport information and how we capture it, but we also take care about the quality level of the data we capture. Yeah.
Right.
Metrics like to define ways how a consortium of people can vote on the correctness of data, like things like that.
Absolutely. And oh, sorry, go ahead, Mark.
No, I was done.
Yes, yeah. I was just going to say, I don't think this goes far enough to address your concern, but which is a good concern. But the one thing I always like to think about OpenChain is when someone delivers their compliance artifacts to you, right? That it somehow gives you an additional assurance that they've been disciplined. The organization that delivered them or prepared them and delivered them, OpenChain says they have a disciplined process in place, and that data set, and again, it's not the exact data set you're talking about, but that set of data or reports, you can trust more, right? It gives you a more comfort in the quality of the compliance artifacts.
But you just two keywords for me. One is trust. How to establish trust in this relationship, that I trust let's say the assessment of another company. We have not really established that so far. Of course, OpenChain is one, let's say, module to getting trust established, yeah, with certification and the like. And the other keyword for me is quality or correctness. Yeah, and I think there we have no idea of correctness of, for example, an SBOM like SPDX. Yeah, I mean, if you look at one project, which is currently also happening in the discussions, we're looking at one project and there are 10 people and there are 20 opinions. What is correct? Yeah? And I think we should jump in there and define the process and procedures and the metrics potentially, or let's say processes to validate and verify that we come to quality data.
Okay, so yeah, your emphasis is on the word quality, is what I'm hearing. And I guess my question would be, how do you see quality and trust related, and how are they different? I do think they're different.
Yeah, good. I mean, I think trust has several components. One is that the one who gives me information. One component of trust is that I think he's doing a good job, and and he's working like in an integrity mode with me, and he basically perhaps takes warranties on the information he shares with me. I mean, may want to come back to him and say, we found there's an issue. Can you please fix this for the next deliverables? This is the relationship, also kind of a business or contractual relationship to the other party. And then there's, of course, the level of quality, because if I have a supplier who gives me kind of arbitrary data to have an SBOM for its product, and it's not usable because it doesn't even fit my processes, my system starts alerting all the time because things are missing, I won't trust him if he does this several times, you know?
Yes, I understand.
So I wanted to share, now the person talking about debombs here in this article is from Unisys, and the debomb project pages are from Unisys. And the main repository here, the 3 people contributing, are Unisys. So what we have here is an example of Unisys implementation of debombs. And that's where there's a lot of work done. As I was putting in the chat, the great news is they've done a lot. And the medium great news is that it's pretty mature as an implementation approach. What we probably want to do as a sanity check is to make sure that the high level is suitable for everyone. So Mark, it goes back to your classic, defining what and how. And maybe that's one of the major contributions we can bring to this global discussion. So we don't end up following someone's defined implementation path just because it's there. We get the big picture right as well.
Yeah, and do you have you had an opportunity to reach out to the SPX working groups or Kate in particular, and what their thinking is around debombs and SPDX?
I have a call with Kate tomorrow to go over this. So we'll be going over it. I do know that Kate is working with Unisys on part of this discussion. Where I'm not at is knowing the level of maturity that discussion has. So, this website that Kanye highlighted links into this. This is essentially explaining debombs and tied to the implementation methodology of Unisys. And you'll notice that it's a debomb project. And that's not exactly defined in governance. There's contributions, but that just goes to GitHub. In practice, what's happening here is that there's a website, debomb.io, going live in mid-2021, it says. And my take is that Unisys is probably getting ready to spin up an LF project. But they'll need partners to do that, and they'll need contributors to do that. In 2 days, I should have more information from Kate on where they're at.
Okay. And one additional thought, and again, these are just, kind of eclectic thoughts, okay, because this is kind of all new. In the Linux Foundation description of the debomb, in the top bullet points, it's interesting that it called out malware.
Right.
And then I didn't see malware in the rest of the document, yet they also refer to vulnerabilities or known vulnerabilities. I do think they're 2 important ideas or concepts, but I do see them as different.
Yeah.
And one thing we as a working group haven't really touched on that yet. And I think it's fine. I think the security guide is a good first step, your minimum viable product kind of delivery. We might also, if the malware is an important piece of this, have maybe the natural next extension is to include malware in our guide, or does it merit a separate guide? I don't necessarily believe so, but that's just an observation I made, and I guess it's important for us to define the difference, right? Yep. Malware, I think, is the difference would be it's known pieces of software that are out there intended to make or do damage or be harmful. Right. And that's their main purpose. They've been written and they exist. Whereas vulnerabilities are just gaps in your armor, right, that can be exploited and are exploited from time to time. Anyway, just one more subtle observation I made by looking at this.
Yeah, no, it's an important one, I think. And there's another thing I put, this Digital Bill of Materials Consortium LF project isn't a project yet.
Okay.
The project is currently active. There's no there's no project there. So this is a thinking document out there being.
Got it.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a good point. I think to some extent, the Unisys team might have been throwing ideas at a wall. So the malware and security conflation is probably due to that, because it hasn't yet been refined and stakeholders haven't all got together to chew it through. And I concur with you, Mark. I mean, malware is not exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about the security concerns. So if you close all of the security points, you address a lot of malware, but targeted malware can come at you regardless. Okay, yeah, that's interesting stuff. Now, this is new. I don't want to jump the gun and say that we can make a massive contribution here, but it seems to fit into our remit. I'll be talking with Dave Marr, our chairman, about this stuff. It strikes me that the noodling that's going on, let's say, the Unisys DBOM project GitHub, shows what appears to be quite sophisticated implementation technology, which they're obviously making public. And that has a certain momentum of its own, but it doesn't mean it'll be the full picture, right? So we have some great contributors in OpenChain with very sophisticated management technology like PwC for software management, but it doesn't mean that the only one that can do the software management is PwC's approach. So we should probably treat this as the same, but because they're so sophisticated and have such domain knowledge, we certainly shouldn't bump against them with friction. We should just try to make sure we fit into this conversation neatly. Well, we appear to have consensus. If there's any more comments, just let me know. All right, no more comments. So in summary then, we're going to have in 2 days some more PR about the Security Assurance Reference Guide, and that's going to be addressed in around 2 weeks and 2 days with a review at our mini summit, which takes place at Seattle's Open Source Summit that virtually no one apart from Mark is going to. So it'll be virtual. SPDX is out as a software bill of materials, and that's great. That normalizes the most sophisticated SBOM for the whole market. There's some really exciting discussions going on about DBOMs, and it looks like we have some very solid friends over at Unisys who have a huge amount of experience in the domain, and also some have some very interesting technology for implementation. There's a kind of a getting started DBOM discussion here of what looks like may evolve into a public consortium project for LF. And I'm going to check out what stage that is at with Kate in the next day or two, because it's all tied into this DBOM project repository, which is managed by Unisys people. We get a good idea that the primary stakeholder currently is Unisys. And we'll work to align with them, both to learn and to provide knowledge. Ideally, we should have perfect interconnect between SPDX and whatever DBOM standards come out of the next phase of discussion. It's likely, given the discussions with the Chinese government, for example, this will all be quite accelerated to make sure that the gaps are covered. And that, unless there's any other business, is that, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, brilliant. Thanks for being on the call. Very excited about what we'll do next, and have a lovely, safe day.
Thanks, Shane. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye all.